right, just got done with our test drive. Car's running a little bit down on power, a little stumbly on tip-in.
I'm feeling a little queasy.
What, you complaining about my driving? So we pulled up some codes. We've got a check engine light, and all we've got is a P0133.
Yeah, O2.
Yeah, so we got a slow responding O2 sensor. Well, I mean, that could be part of the problem, but O2 is sort of a correction factor for what the engine's doing, what it's reading, adding the fuel. It could be part of the problem, but I don't know if it's going to correct everything that we're seeing.
Yeah, but the car has 120,000 miles. I mean, it's time to change.
Well, it's true. I mean, an engine that's got a lot of life on it, it's starting to burn a little bit more oil, and the entire life of that engine, anything that runs through that exhaust is starting to coat that sensor, right?
It's crazy they live that long.
Yeah, so it's going to coat the sensor, it's going to slow it down, and if you think about driving, you're going down a straight road, an O2 sensor is kind of like an on-off. It can go right, it can go left. Well, the faster I can go right and left, the straighter I can kind of stay versus slow, I'm going to be leaving, right?
Back and forth, back.
So a little bit slow, yeah, exactly. A little bit slow responding just means I'm a little bit off my air-fuel ratio. I can lose a little fuel economy, maybe a little bit of kind of idle quality and things like that. But I think what we'll do, let's throw some O2s in it.
Definitely.
Delete the codes out and see where we're at and go from there.
Yep. O2 sensors are easy to swap out. All you do is unplug the plug. There's usually one on either side of your cat. And then if you're lucky like us, you have this cool slotted socket. Slide it on. You can use a wrench too, but this makes it nice and easy. Unscrew. Now once you go to put the new one on, use a nice quality planer unit like this one from Delphi. It's going to make cold starts much better. We're going to show you more about that later in the show, but to install, you want to make sure you have some anti-seize here. These come with it already on, so that makes it easy. Pull the first one out, put it back in to about 28 foot-pounds of torque, and plug it in and you're done.
All right, quick work by my man Fuller. Got the O2 sensors swapped out. Now I can go in here, delete out my codes, start from scratch, and go for a test drive.
And get some lunch.
Lunch sounds good. All right, cheeseburger, no mayo, don't forget to shake.
Extra cheese for you, I know.
That's right.
All right.
Well, what do you say, Brian? Any
Not
better?
much better, man.
Not much.
No, it's pretty much the same.
All right.
Hey, we did get the O2 codes off, though.
All right, so no more
Got that
O2
done.
codes. Okay, did you get the cheeseburgers?
Oh, yeah, got cheeseburger.
All right, we got the cheeseburgers. All right, so how's idle?
Idle's better. Idle's definitely better.
Okay, well, the burgers are greasy the way I like them, so that's good. All right, so tip-in response when you mash the pedal?
About the same.
About the same.
Yeah,
all
not
right.
really that great. Power's still kind of not really there.
All right, it's a little under power.
Yeah.
All right, well, sounds like we got some chewing to do on our burgers and maybe the problem.
Yes.
So why don't we get some of these in our belly? On a full stomach, we can think our way through it and go from there. All right. All right, you know, it's a lot easier to think with a full stomach. So I've drawn out an engine, kind of thinking the way through, you know, why we've got some sort of the diagnostic problems, the rough hesitation when you tip in the throttle, a little bit of idle and stuff. So here's my engine. I've drawn it sideways, and I've drawn a V8, even though we're working on a V6. So I've got my engine block down here, my damper, my cylinder head, my exhaust manifold, my cat exhaust, and I've got my intake with my throttle body. Now on an old carburetor, you open the throttle, you got air coming in, and the differences in pressures through the metering circuits are what's going to pull fuel in. And the only way to really correct if you've measured wrong or you've added fuel wrong is if you get out and measure your spark plugs at different driving conditions, or maybe look at the tailpipe and see a bunch of carbon buildup. But on a modern engine, with a PCM and a computer, we measure a lot of stuff, we do a lot of calculations. So we'll measure the air as we open the throttle. The computer will predict or calculate how much fuel to add in. And then we can see how we're doing by the oxygen sensor. So it's measuring how good a job we did of metering, putting the fuel in, and burning it. Well, in our case, we had some slow oxygen sensors, so they've gotten contaminated over time. We replaced them, but we still got this slightly rough idle, poor tip-in, lack of performance. So we've got to figure out, fuel, spark, and air, which one of those we're having problems with. So I think we can rule out spark. We might have a fueling problem. We might have an air metering problem, so we're measuring wrong. So that kind of puts us up here. Now, we don't have any codes, so it's not telling us what's wrong. But the thing about a vehicle this old, you can start aging sensors. So all of a sudden you're misreading and you're miscalculating. So we've got two different types of faults. We can do a functional fault, like we've got a short circuit, maybe in the sensor somewhere, or a rational fault, like the sensor starts aging and it's misreading, and it can do that for a little while until it gets out of range, and then it says, hey, I think something's wrong with the sensor. So we might be just before that, let's say on a MAF or something else. So maybe we want to focus in on the air metering and see if we can dial that, like get it out of the way, measure it.
Sure.
So,
probably a good idea to visually inspect it too, check it out, because in this area, if you get any cracks or problem. In fact, let's just go ahead and look. If you look on top of your intake, this is where your MAF sensor is. So you can pull the sensor, look at that, make sure there aren't any wires off, that there are any weird corrosion, anything between the sensor and the intake or the throttle body. If you have any problem between those two, it's going to throw off your reading.
Yeah, and all the way down, everything into your cylinder, so you could have an intake port gasket leak. So any leaks between the sensor and burning that air and fuel mixture could throw everything off a little bit, but
this
so
all
far,
seems to be in good shape.
Yeah, I don't see any cracks. The hoses are all tight.
Yeah.
Maybe we look up the service procedure, see if we can measure what that's supposed to be reading, see if we're in the zone, and
take a little
by the
test
way,
drive.
what's going on with your chin?
That's soul patch. You
It
got
looks
one
more
too?
like a pickle or a burger bun.
Oh.
Okay.
Sorry
All right, let's pull up the service manual. Let's see what we can read, and maybe we'll go for another test drive. All right, welcome back. Now we think we've kind of isolated to somewhere here in the intake track. We didn't see any, obvious leaks, so maybe we've got an actual metering problem somewhere in the MAF sensor.
Now, in a way to test, we've printed out from the Chevrolet Impala service manual, and there's a way to test. So what we're going to do is plug a scan tool into our OBD2 computer, and we're going to read grams per second of air, both at idle, which should be about 3 to 10, and we're going to stand on it. When we hit the 1-2 shift from first gear to second gear, we should be somewhere around 150 grams per second.
Okay, 150 grams, so we can look at our scan tool, and if we're too far off one way or the other, we might have something wrong with that sensor. So let's go for another drive. Yeah. All right, Brian, let's do a burnout, wide open throttle. Let's see what kind of measurement we get at the 1-2 shift.
All right, 50, 60, 75, 100, 104, about 100, yeah. We're about 20% low.
So it didn't quite get to 150 grams per second?
No, not quite.
All right, well, that's starting to make some sense. You know what, let's go ahead and swap out that MAF and see if it improves our number, see if the calibration of the sensor is a little bit off.
Okay. Now we know from my test drive and service manual that we're about 20% out on our MAF sensor. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull that out so we can replace it. So pop the hose, get the sensor out. This one, by chance, you can actually just pull the air cleaner off. Okay, there we go. So now we'll put this on the bench. You can see the housing itself. Now a lot of times if you were to buy a new MAF sensor, you would get this whole part. But Delphi has come up with a nice deal where you just replace the sensor.
Imagine that. Why throw away something that's not bad?
That's right.
If there's no cracks in this little housing, then why toss it? Let's just place a sensor on it. And
on this car, that one sensor could fit like 8 million vehicles, Tahoes, Suburbans.
Yeah, and each of them might have a different airflow requirement, but they can calibrate that same sensor, so it's nice. Yeah. Now here's the sensor itself. Comes in a little kit with a key that Brian will show you, and how it works is by hot wire anemometry. Okay, so that didn't quite make sense. It's thin film platinum resistors, right? So they're right here, and the airstream's coming across. Now these resistors are maintained at about 400 F, so they got current flowing through them, and they're nice and hot. Well, as air blows through, you open the throttle, air comes through, it's trying to cool them off. Well, that integrated circuit says, oh, I've got to add more current. So based on the additional current that it needs to add to maintain that same temperature, it knows what the airflow is.
Amazing. There's a little brain in your intake track.
Yeah, right there, there's a brain. So it's telling the computer, I'm measuring exactly this many grams per second, and everything else goes from there.
And on this car, 120,000 miles on those little platinum wires.
Oh yeah, and what makes them kind of get slow and aged over time is you've got a lot of PCV gases which have oils and vapors on them. Some of you guys are running air filters that are oil-based for how they operate. You oil them too much. Slowly those vapors, they bake on there just like in an oven, right? And you can try to clean them over time, but after a certain age, they've just got too much coating on.
Yeah, cleaning a little wire that's got a brain on it. It's always a good idea.
Yeah, now speaking of which, don't touch the electronics.
And there's your key. So I've got it here. I'm going to go ahead and push it down into the body unit. What you're doing is hitting a tab, You want to go in with a little screwdriver and just pop, say that. There we go. And there's an O-ring. You're just going to try to get that to perfect.
All right, easy enough.
Okay, and you take the new one. Don't touch it.
But I can touch this one.
And hope I get it to the right direction. There we go. Don't need that anymore. I'm gonna flip it just to make it easier to push on. There we go.
All right.
I love it when we can ride around, eat ice cream, and test sensors all at the same time, read codes.
Oh, I know. And get our power back, get our drivability back, tip in response, way better.
Running great.
So, and that's partly because we can do a correction factor with the O2, but that slug of air when you change the throttle isn't getting metered until it's already burnt, it's already been through the exhaust, through the sensor. Well, it's too late, so now you got this lag. But now we're crispy, good throttle, good power, right back on
It's
the money.
amazing how critical air-fuel mixture is, and being able to read it on each side, MAF at the front, O2 sensor in the back, talking back and forth, and the quicker that can happen, the better it can understand what it is and correct.
Yeah, that's right. Now PCMs are getting faster. The sensor technology is getting better to be faster as well. So we upgraded to the planar style instead of the conical style O2 sensor. So that planar style puts the heating element and the sensor on one thin film. There's less mass. So on cold start, you've got to put heat into that sensor. Once it gets hot, then it can light off and it can do its job.
Now you got the correct ratio early instead of waiting for the old style to get hot.
Yeah, that's right. So we've got our vehicle running tip-top, 120,000 miles, and instead of rebuilding a carburetor, a couple of simple sensors, this thing's ready to go for quite a while.
Couple of clips, couple of screws, that was easy.